When I told my folks I was going overseas and I flew up to Seattle to get on the plane, called my folks, my dad said, "Is your APO changing?" In other words, was I going to Vietnam? I said no. So here I am in Seoul, Korea. I had several Korean friends that work with me on the base, and we used to go visiting Seoul. These are a couple of the Koreans I stayed with. They were called Katusas, Korean Augmentation to United States Army. Good people, good men. Had a lot of respect for them. One of the places we visited in Seoul was the zoo. It's kind of neat. It's just fall, starting to get a little chilly, but it was neat. It was neat because in the middle of Seoul, Korea, they had a camel. I went, "What?" He said, "Here he is." And they had a beautiful painter was sitting there painting away, and I took a couple shots of him. But they had very old temples. I mean, 1,000 years old. Here's one of them. Here's a picture coming up of the newer temple. This is a picture of some of their priests. Seoul was a pretty country. We were about 10 miles from the DMZ in a town called Uijeonbu. That's the emperor's old coach. Another temple. It was Christmas time, so our unit, one company, threw a party for a bunch of orphan kids. We bought them toys and stuff and fed them dinner and just had a big party for them. Once a year they did, or a couple times a year, they did stuff for the orphans. I was watching this one kid as he was stuffing apples and oranges and nuts in his pockets as fast as we'd give them to him. And so he'd stuff some away. I'd just throw some more on the table to him. I figured I had a hell of a lot better life than he did. It was interesting at best. This is a picture of the kid that was stuffing his pockets. This is a drunken GI at the party. He passed out. We used to go camping up in the mountains a lot. What I call camping. You always run across strange stuff up there. We saw a bunch of guys sitting up on a hill doing something, so we kind of crept up on them to see what they were doing, and I'm taking pictures. Well, come to find out, they were praying to somebody that had passed away. I don't know how many years ago, but they buried their people on a big mound, and it was kind of solemn to watch them. But it was, basically their cemetery. But it was cold in Korea. Don't need to say too much, but it was cold. There's one of my Korean buddies. They were short little boogers, but they were good men. This is where I stayed. I swear this is a Korean War hutch, old Quonset hut. Had a little oil heater in those babies. There's a couple of my buddies. Coming up is a picture of a couple Koreans. They were little, but they were tough. There's a lady we saw on the street. It's a picture of Wee John Boo. That's where we used to go and party. The guy on the left, his name is James A. Schneehagen, J-A-S. Carved his initials in his rifle. Lost a stripe over it. Here we are getting ready to go camping again. If anybody wonders why I don't want to go camping, here's why. We did it all the time. It just drive me nuts. Go up and play war. We'd go up by the DMZ and camp run amok. It was too cold for me. I says, it's too cold for me. What do I do to get out of this place? I am freezing. I don't like the warm weather. They said, well, you can always volunteer. You can always go to Vietnam. I went, give me the papers. So I said goodbye to Korea. My sister and brother-in-law were in the Philippines. I said, I'm going to go visit them in the Philippines. Guess what? Here we are. That's a jeepney. Cool. They like to color their taxis. I spent a month there with Lee and Gary, and we were all over the place. We had a ball. Leah actually took me into a bar where all the Navy guys hung out, at a strip bar. And I mean, and we're talking about a Christian woman here. The show that was put on, I'm not even going to tell you, but I could not believe it. She took me in there. We had a ball. I got a little drunk, but yeah, it's a picture of where their house, they actually lived off base. And then we went to a zoo one time, visited the zoo. This is an old Spanish fort right on the coast. And this thing, I don't know how many years old it was. And then we come up to the World War II memorial for the Americans with their names written all over the walls. The Americans that died during World War II. It was kind of sad. It was solemn. It was different. Here's their graves. They had a lot of respect for the Americans over there because we basically saved them from the Japanese. Here we are in an old Philippine cemetery, just looking at the old cemetery plots. The town we were in was Olongapo, about 60 miles from Manila. It was different, no doubt about it. Different world. Mainly it was there for the GIs, the sailors, come off the boats. Drunken sailors, and I mean drunk. But we had a good time. We traveled all over. And then I had to say goodbye to them. This is coming back from one of our expeditions. They were sleeping. This is when I decided to go to Vietnam. Well, I'm on my way to Vietnam. I went there because of the so-called domino theory. All of Southeast Asia is going to fall if Vietnam falls. Fortunately, I got there for the Tet Offensive. I was there less than a week, and they hit us with a ground attack, rockets, and 122 rockets and mortars. Here's what a 122 can do to your hooch. This is where I used to work, but it don't exist. It was about 2 houses from me. This is a 122 rocket. This is during the Tet Offensive. They blew us all to pieces. The commanding officer there wanted us, they blew up an ammo dump too. They wanted us to go over to the ammo dump and get the sappers out. But they said, but you can't take any weapons with you. What? You want us to go over there, grab them by our hands? Anyway, I was always fascinated with the helicopters flying over. Kept taking pictures of helicopters. Don't know why, but I did. I says, this is a headquarters unit. How do I get out of here? I'm tired of inspections. I'm tired of the bull. I came over here to fight a war. What can I do? Said you can be a door gunner. Bingo. I moved over to the Benoit Airport and went in with the 1st Aviation Brigade. These are some of our gunning choppers. These are the mama sons that took care of our hooches. They'd make our beds and shine our shoes, clean our clothes. We used to go on, here's another mama son. We had 2 types of missions. We had CAs, combat assault, and direct combat support, DCSs. A combat assault included 12 ships, 10 riding ships, more than that, 10 ships, 4 gunners, Smokey and the command ship. On one of our missions, we flew into a plantation, landed in the wrong spot, and as we were taking off, in a hurry, we hit a bunch of palm trees, and we went down. We crashed, and we went down. They started basically blowing the hell out of us, and they shot us all to pieces. And we're just looking at the ship to see how much damage we had. We had a medic while we were there that we were medevacing the Vietnamese out to Saigon. And on 4 different lifts, he kept bringing people to us. The more he'd bring to us, every time 4, 5, and 6 guys that were shot up. And on the last lift, we hauled him out. He'd been shot in the head. I don't think he made it. But that's where I won the Cross of Gallantry and Bronze Star from the Vietnamese government. Now, these are pictures of burning Saigon. This is what I actually call the second Tet Offensive. We were actually in the air at night looking for rocket and mortar positions. We had a forward observer with us, and we were in the air at night when this attack took place. And it was absolutely incredible to see all the rockets, all the different positions of rockets were taken off from. They were shooting at Long Binh, Benoit, and Saigon, and just blowing everything to pieces. And we watched the whole thing start that night, up in the air. Then the next couple of days later, we flew to Saigon, and that's where I started taking these pictures. Saigon was actually burning. It was at best an experience. But they blew the hell out of everything. Well, I forgot to tell you about when I was at the first base, Long Bend, the headquarters base, double-doored lockers. Used to roll my panties and my socks, and everything was pretty. We had a commander that at night would lock up our weapons during the Tet Offensive. And then we'd get hit that night, and we'd have to run and grab our weapons. One day, after a ground attack, we still had our weapons. I'm walking towards the commander. I'm about 20 feet from him. Another guy is about 50 feet away with his rifle. He lays a rifle on his lap, points it at the commander, pulls a round off. He misses him, hits right between both of us. Got the commander's attention. We said, oops. Needless to say, that night our guns were locked up again. So here we are, back flying around different places. The combat assault missions, when we had all the ships and all the guys, were interesting, but when we did DCS, direct combat support, that meant there was one mission, one plane, nobody else. We were by ourselves. You never knew what you were going to run into. And we ran into a bunch of captured VC nurses. Here they are bringing them onto the plane. They look scared to death. Our base used to be known as Dr. Pepper, I called it. Dr. Pepper meeting 10, 2, and 4. We used to get hit by rockets and mortars from 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, just enough to keep us awake. And they were usually shooting at the planes on the base, because our base was with the Air Force. The Air Force had a bunch of planes, and they were trying to blow them away. So they didn't aim at the choppers very often, but I could actually hear the click of the siren going off, and the minute I'd hear that click, I'd start running for the bunkers. But here's another direct DCS mission, direct combat support mission. And we run into a bunch of captured VC. One morning we were taking off, and it was, 4 or 5 in the morning. It was an early mission, and it was a combat assault, so the whole company was taking off. And as we were taking off, I was watching this jet take off from the Air Force side. This jet starts taking off. His motor explodes. He points it straight up in the air, and I see it poof, looked like he ejected. The plane crashes into the ground. That's all you can see is a big explosion. Next thing we know, our company commander's on the mic saying, "Where are you at? Where are you at?" He says, "I'm over here." And we said, "Pop a flare." Okay, cool. We had these little handheld flares. Well, 3 flares came up. We went, "Oh, I don't think so. There's only one pilot." We said, "Okay, pop another flare." Well, 3 flares came up again. So we had gunships with us. So we told the guy, "Okay, pop the color of the flare, the first color of the American flag, red, white, and blue." So up comes a red flare, a blue flare, a green flare. We sent the gunships after the other flares and went up and picked up the pilot. We didn't, but one of my other ships picked him up, took him back to the base. He was alive and well. The other guys got blown away by our gunships. That evening, came back, and the guys that picked him up, there was 4 filet mignon steaks waiting for him at the base. It was cool. Now we have the South Vietnamese nurses. Good looking little ones. Guess who? This is a picture of a gunship with his rockets and his minigun. We had 4 of them with us on the combat assault missions. Here comes, that's a VC. Put them in a truck and they were hauling them away. For some reason, he looked at the camera and was smiling, and I went, okay, whatever. Guess who? That's the U.S. Embassy. You've seen that on TV in Saigon. We flew Saigon. We fly around called the Parrot's Beak, Nui Ba Din, the Iron Triangle, which was always an experience. We always took fire there, but of all the time I was in the air, we lost more ships from maintenance than we did from bullets. I've seen as many as, one time, 6 choppers were hit. The first 6 choppers were hit. Not one guy on the chopper got hit. I never lost anybody in my unit when I was in Vietnam. Not one person died in the chopper unit. Now, at the other unit in the Tet Offensive, I played cards with a kid that night, and he didn't survive the Tet. But as a door gunner, I never lost anybody in my unit. We had a few guys get shot up, but nobody died. This guy is a wounded VC. That's me standing there, and they're pointing at the wounded VC, so I took some pictures of him. Said, surprise, who's that? We used to travel out in the middle of nowhere. No telling what time we'd take off. Early morning was usually, sometimes it was too early for me. But this is up by the Cambodian border, and here's a old Montagnard guy who was in the South Vietnamese army. There's another Montagnard person. It was actually the Indian tribe of South Vietnam. Never knew what you were going to run into. It was always something different. Yours truly. I was a little skinnier then. I was up from all that good chicken we used to eat. Wish I had that body now. We flew a lot of the combat support missions with the special forces. One time we flew into a special forces camp, and they told us, don't tie down because they've got the landing pad zeroed in. Now these places were in the middle of nowhere, and there'd be a little triangle. And as soon as we ran out to get back on it, took off, they dropped mortars right exactly where we had landed. It was an experience. You just never knew. But we got into the chopper fast enough where they didn't have a chance to hit us. But I'll never forget that guy saying, "Don't tie down. Jump out of the chopper and run." Well, which we did. Here's a picture of a Special Forces camp. It's kind of dark, but you can kind of get an idea. They were either in triangles or in stars. Here's a picture of another little Montagnard kid. And I got to go on a R&R to Thailand. There I am with a Buddhist priest. They put leaves of gold on their little Buddhist temples and pray. It's kind of neat. Got to go there twice. Here's a picture of a hooch. That's where we used to live. I was on the bottom floor, which was good. There's a family out in the middle of nowhere. They used to take, one time they used to take a grenade and they stick it in a can so that when we'd fly over them, we'd blow the can off when we were landing. And when they blew the can off, the grenade would pop out and it'd blow up. One time we shifted positions and I went from chalk 5 to chalk 6. Guess which one chopper got hit by the grenade? It was chop 5. I just missed it right at the last minute. I was lucky. And I always felt I was lucky over there. Here's some airstrikes on villages. I've actually seen them dropping napalm on villages. It was an ugly sight. These are B-52 strikes. One time, we were in the Parrot's Beak on a mission, and these B-52 holes in the ground, they were about 10 feet deep, and they were full of water. One time, a mortar blasted in front of me, about 5 feet in front of me, sunk down into the hole, blew up, and all I got was wet. I went, oh, that was close. Here's a Montagnard gal walking down the street. Just some pictures of the countryside. It's gone pretty country. That's Special Forces guys we were working for. This was supposedly a VC family that they were taken back to be reindoctrinated. Never knew whether they made it back or just kicked them out of the plane. This is up by the Cambodian border. These are some Montagnard tribesmen. See the things on their legs? Those were kind of neat. And those gals just kind of looked at me, gave me a funny look. I mean, they weren't yelling or screaming, but she kind of smiled. Got a Montagnard crossbow in my attic. It's a Montagnard Indian fighter. There's some of the ladies. That's another Montagnard gal. That is a pig that we're taking to a special forces base to feed a bunch of guys. They're going to eat that pig. Here's another attack on Saigon. Some of my flying buddies. Here we are flying to the top of a mountain called Nui Ba Din. It was a mountain in the middle of nowhere. All of a sudden, here's a hill. Well, the Americans had the top of the hill. The Viet Cong had all the rest of it. A friend of mine at Fort Carson fell off that hill on his chopper, busted his back up. We didn't. We made it. Another airstrike. Now, we're on a combat assault. Here comes Smokey. Smoke ship would lay down the ship, would lay down the smoke, and then we'd drop in right behind him. We had 10 ships, 10 airlift ships, 4 gunnies, Smokey, and the command ship. There's Smokey again. It's kind of cool. Smokey was nuttier than a fruitcake. The guy flew like the ape man from Borneo. They laid down smoke between us and the Kong, if there was any there. And once all the smoke, they laid the smoke down, we dropped the troops off. Like I said, I visited all the temples in all the countries, but Thailand was just absolutely incredible. The colors, the temples, I mean, and these things, you know, we're talking thousands of years old or 1,000 years old, but it was just absolutely beautiful. I mean, just to be there and to see what they did, it was something. We hired a guide, and he guided us through the place, but you see all these different, I mean, just everywhere you looked was all these gorgeous, beautiful temples. I got 2 R&Rs there. Got to go there twice. Had an absolute ball. Was drunker than a skunk at night, and then During the day, I'd go temple touring, and we hit them every time. It's just absolutely gorgeous, ornate colors. Here's our guide and one of my buddies I went with. And then they had this 5.5 ton solid gold Buddha that for years had been covered up with cement. Nobody knew what it was for hundreds and hundreds of years. And one day they found out underneath all that cement was 5.5 tons of solid gold. Got a picture of it coming up here. Yeah, I'm going, whoa. This thing was huge. It was absolutely amazing, beautiful. One of the things they're famous for is their ivory and their jewelry and their emeralds and their rubies, their silk. Went into a warehouse that looked like Walmart, but only 50 feet tall. Nothing but silk. Every color in the world. Here's the ivory carvings. There I am in the background. Now imagine 50 feet tall. Nothing. This is all you see for, like 50 yards. It's incredible. Really neat. That's one of the fancy hotels. We didn't stay there. There's too much. We stayed in a little cheaper place because we didn't care where we slept. We just wanted to know where the booze was at. There's that 5.5 ton golden Buddha again. I took a lot of pictures of him because it was fascinating. This guy was kind of cool, kind of different. Took a shot of him. Had a good camera. Had an old Minolta SRT 101. It was nice. Here's a bunch of Buddhists lined up together. The architecture, like I said, was just absolutely amazing. They had this one Buddha called a reclining Buddha. I don't know how long this guy was, but he looked like 40, maybe 40 yards, 50 yards long. There you can see a picture of a guy right next to him called the reclining Buddha. And here's, let's see, some ladies we met on the street. It was always interesting. You never knew what we were going to be doing. One day we had flying with 3 different companies. That meant about at least 80 ships. It was a big mission. And I watched 3 of them fall out of the sky from engine seizures. One of them was, both of them that dropped out of the sky while we were flying, landed, did an auto rotation where they pull up the power all at once and they land very gently. Spread out the landing gears just a little, but they were all right. The one that crashed right in front of me flipped over. I saw a piece of blade coming at me about 15 feet, and I went, oh, this is going to hurt. But it went underneath the ship, and then we landed. We were about 10 feet off the ground when it crashed. Oh, I said, that's going to hurt, but it missed me. And the pilots and the gunners were fine. Here's Smokey again. Blow some smoke, see which way the wind's blowing. While we were flying, we had, I saw, while I was there, 2 ammo dumps blow. One time I was sitting up on top of a barracks on guard duty at night, and it blew up at night. And you see an ammo dump blow, it's an experience. I've seen it level a whole building, just a concussion from it. Definitely wakes you up. Here we are picking up some troops. We'll take them on a combat assault. We throw pop smoke so we'd figure out where the landing zone was at. Then we'd drop the troops off and they'd do their ground assault. We didn't always do it well. Half the time we'd pick them up in the same spot we dropped them off, meaning they didn't move at all. We just took them out for a brief lunch and then picked them up. One time we dropped them off. And the place we dropped them off was an area like this, but it was surrounded by bunkers. And we got on our last lift, got ready to pick them up. And the very last lift out of there, all those bunkers opened up on us. That's the one where they hit 6 ships. These guys hadn't done nothing. But I laid my machine gun into the guy that was shooting at us, and I was chalk 7, and he hit the first 6 ships, but once he got to me, it was over. I never actually saw anybody drop from my bullets. The only thing that dropped from my bullet one time was a huge pig. A VC was standing next to him, and I was aiming at the VC, and I blew the pig all to pieces. Some of the Vietnamese forces we worked with were courageous fighters. They were good men. This is some of them right here. If you can see the patch of the panther on his arm. We used to pick these guys up in what we call a hot LZ. In other words, an LZ that we were taking fire in, and take them to another place to fight. I mean, they were tough. But in general, most of them were worthless. Now we're about 3 clicks away from Cambodia. We're at a base that was overrun the night before by the Viet Cong. The American commander called in a bombardment of 105 and 155 artillery on the base because he was getting overrun. He called in the airstrike, or the artillery strike, and they blasted this base all to hell. He crawled down in a hole that they dug. They'd already dug. There's some RPG rounds. But he crawled down in the hole and he survived. But there was women and men attacking them. But the artillery just leveled this base. There was bodies everywhere. There's some more RPG rounds. But they just leveled that place. There's some bodies, VC bodies, both men and women, both. But they decided that the village was right next to it. They were going to evacuate the whole village. And they literally brought in Chinook helicopters and a bunch of choppers and evacuated the whole village because there was no way you could protect them. They just pulled them out, took them to another village. Here they are getting ready to get on the choppers. Yeah, just some of the troops we worked with. Well, we did a lot of medevacs. I medevaced a lot of VC, a lot of South Vietnamese. The hardest ones to medevac were the Americans. Didn't do a lot of them, but we did a few. We hauled bodies. We never hauled any VC bodies, but we hauled South Vietnamese bodies. The hardest body was the first American body I picked up. I cried when we did that. That was tough. Never bothered me when they were Vietnamese, but that first American was tough. There's 2.5 million Americans went over there, and 58,600 died. While I was there, I earned 25 air medals, and I got that Cross of Gallantry with the Bronze Star from the Vietnamese government for that one time we went down at the plantation just out of Saigon. But what I learned over there was if it was your time to go, it would have been your time and nothing you could do about it. Got close a few times, but I'm here. I got home. Out in the middle of nowhere, I get off my chopper to go eat. Here's an APC with James A. Schneehagen from Korea sitting on it. He took one look at me and he said, "I don't believe it." Both of us out in the middle of nowhere, and there he was. Incredible. And then I ran into him in Las Vegas one time. Could not believe it. In the middle of nowhere. Here's just some more troops we're picking up to go on an assault. I went to Vietnam to stop Southeast Asia from falling, but that's not true. Vietnam was about North Vietnam wanting to reunite with South Vietnam. That's all Ho Chi Minh wanted. I went there for a reason, but it was the wrong reason. It's a shame in some ways, but I did what I thought was right. All Ho Chi Minh wanted was to reunite the two countries.